Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Penny and this is Penny's Small Spaces. Well, I've been away for a little bit. My girlfriends and I took a trip down to the incredible city of New Orleans. What an amazing place. Now I am well past my party days, but I don't think anybody should go to New Orleans and not check out Bourbon Street. So of course we did that, and oh my, what a fun place to people watch. We spent a lot of time in the French Quarter, of course, and some time in the Garden District. And then we also did a tour of the Whitney Plantation, which is just outside of New Orleans. While we were in the French Quarter, I came across this incredible little shop that does miniatures and other collectibles called the Black Butterfly 2. What an amazing little shop that was. And I managed to pick up the cutest little breakfast tray, which I will show you a picture of here. We're also lucky enough to catch some incredible jazz and blues music, both inside the clubs as well as on the streets. Now, if you are from New Orleans, let me just say that you all are some of the nicest people I think I've ever come across while traveling. We met so many people who were so helpful, gave us great recommendations for restaurants, things to see and do in the city, and it was amazing. Now, of course, all good things have to come to an end, so I am back home in the Great White North where we had our first snowfall on Tuesday. Luckily, it didn't stick, but it's just a precursor to what's coming in the very near future. So in today's video, we're going to go back to the friend's apartment. I really want to finish creating all of the walls for the apartment and get them all standing. I hope you'll stick around and join me, and I hope you like the video. I'm starting with the door that leads into the apartment. Now there are actually 5 doors in the apartment, and for the most part they're all built exactly the same. So I'm only going to show you once on camera how I made these doors, and then you can use that process for the remainder of the doors as well. I'm going to be using this 3/32 of an inch thick wood, or it's about 3 millimeters, because it's about the same depth as the one layer of cardboard that I've cut out. All 5 of the doors have a transom window at the top, so I'm going to start there. So I'm using this square wooden dowel, and it's about the same width as the piece of wood. So it's about 3/32 of an inch, or about 3, maybe 3.5 millimeters wide on all 4 sides. So I've just cut out pieces that will go across the top and bottom, and then of course 2 shorter pieces to put along the sides. I put a piece of wax paper underneath because I want to get the fit right, but I don't want it to be glued in place just yet. Now that those 2 shorter sides are in place, I can go ahead and add the bottom of that frame. And once that glue is set, you can go ahead and lift that whole piece out. Now I personally don't like to see where the 2 pieces of wood are joined together, so I'm just going to take a little bit of wood filler and smooth out where those cracks are. I'm not actually going to glue that in just yet. I just want to test and make sure that once the door is in there that everything is going to fit correctly. Now you notice that I've left a gap at the bottom of that door. If you remember in the first video, I cut down the first 2 layers of cardboard so that the bottom layer gave me a little bit of a lip for the wall to sit on. And that space at the bottom is going to be taken up with that difference in the levels of the floor piece. Now those transom windows all had what looked to be frosted glass in them. And so I decided to go ahead and paint the frame before I put that faux frosted glass in, because I know me and I would have gotten paint all over it if I had painted afterwards. There's no need to paint the back or the outside edges of that frame. You won't see them once they're installed. And since I have my paint out, I'm going to go ahead and paint the door as well. Now to make the frosted glass, I first cut out a piece of white cardstock, and this is the same size as the frame. And I'm going to cover that white cardstock with a piece of permanent vinyl. So I used to do a lot of signs, vinyl signs, and I had this, this Cricut vinyl that's kind of an opaque color to it, and it has a little bit of like a silvery kind of sparkle. And I think once it comes off of the backing that it's going to work really well to look like frosted glass. So that's what I'm going to try. Now it did lose a little bit of its opaqueness, obviously, because I put it on the white cardstock, but I thought it would look better than just putting it directly onto the brown cardboard. So now that it's on that piece of paper, I'm just going to cut away the excess and we'll lay it down where that window will be, and we'll see how it looks. I'm going to glue that down with just a little bit of tacky glue. Now when I put that frame back in, hopefully you can see that it does look a little bit like frosted glass under there. And now that the window is in place, I'm going to go ahead and glue the door in as well. And now finally that piece on the bottom, which doesn't have to be painted, by the way, because you won't be able to see it. Now I wanted to put a little bit of trim around the door as well. And I have these little coffee stir sticks. They're about 1 millimeter thick and they're probably 4 millimeters wide, which I love to use when I'm working in 1/12 scale. They are obviously way too big for 1/24 scale, but I was able to cut them down. I just kind of cut them into slivers, and I found the size that I felt looked good in 1/24 scale. And I've mitered off the corners at the top, and I'm going to just go ahead and put a frame around the two sides and the top of the door. And once they were glued in place, of course, I had to go in and give them a little bit of paint as well to match the rest of the door. So here we have the completed door on the inside as far as the paint is concerned. And then I went ahead and followed that exact same process, and I built the door for the outside of the apartment, or what you would see from the hallway. Now, the outside door is a little bit different color. It's not the same purple that's on the inside of the apartment. And I still need to go ahead and put the trim up around the door. The second wall of the apartment is relatively simple. So this is the wall that sits at a 90-degree angle between the door and the kitchen. So what's on this wall is a coat hook, which I will eventually install. And then there's a little bit of decorative molding on that wall as well. And so I'm just using the same coffee stir sticks and the same basic process that I used to frame the door. I went ahead and painted that trim the same purple color as the wall. Now you can see that I added a little piece of trim down there at the bottom. Please don't do that. I thought I was going to get a little ahead of the game with some baseboard, but of course it's totally in the wrong spot because the lower, probably 1/4 inch of that wall is behind the base of the floor and you won't see it anyway. So just ignore that little piece at the bottom. Now the next 3 pieces are for the kitchen. So this piece on this side is where the stove and the cupboards would have been. And then we have our window, and then this 3rd piece would be where the refrigerator is. Now these 3 pieces are covered in either exposed brick or in white tile. So I've got exposed brick across the top of all 3. In between where the upper cupboards are and the counter is some white tile, and then also on the side where the refrigerator is, it's tile from about halfway down, and the rest of it you can't see because it's covered by either counters or tables or something along those lines. So what I did was I went into Google Images and I found what I thought was pretty close to the same type of brickwork that's in the kitchen, and I printed off a fair bit of it. And then I also found some white tile, and I know it's difficult to see here on my camera. It doesn't pick it up very well, but the tile in the kitchen of the apartment is this square white tile, and so I've also printed off some of that as well. Before I get to the brick and the tile, however, I wanted to paint the trim that goes around the window. Now this trim is a little bit thicker because it does cover the entire wall on both sides of that window. So I've measured off here where the tile and the brick will be. And so rather than messing around with Podge or glue, I'm just going to use some 2-sided tape to attach those wall finishings. So once I've got that stuck down, I'll just go ahead and trim off all of the excess. I'm going to add the 2-sided tape also to the middle section above the window, and then the entire piece where the refrigerator will go. So I put on the brick first, and yes, I did have to piece it. The images that I found on Google Images were not large enough to do the whole piece in one shot. And if I made them bigger, then of course the bricks were out of scale. So I did have to piece it together, which was fine. At the end of the day, it's barely noticeable. And then underneath the brick, I laid the white tile. Now, it doesn't really matter if it goes a little bit lower because the counter and the stove are going to cover up that bottom edge. Now, what I should have done is left this whole section that I'm cutting off alone because I needed to overlap the previous wall, but I forgot. And I went ahead and cut it off, and then I cursed myself afterwards because I realized as soon as I did it, but it was too late. So trimming off the excess, and then I had to go back in and piece in that little piece that covered that second wall. All right, moving on. The top piece of the center window was relatively easy. One piece was more than enough to fit all the way across, so there was no piecing involved. Now for the third piece, or the piece on the right, you'll notice I'm leaving a little bit of an edge. There's about 1/4 of an inch on the right hand side. In the apartment there was this wood beam that came up beside the refrigerator and kind of came out across the ceiling, and then in the corner by the fridge they had built in some shelves in there. So I'm leaving room for that beam to be installed at a later date. So on this piece, from the bottom of where the brickwork was all the way to the floor was white tile. The refrigerator kind of sat more towards the right of this area, and then in between the fridge and the window there was a little table where the microwave sat, and then oftentimes on top of the microwave there was some other object. Most often was where the mixer was. So I'm putting the white tile all the way down to the bottom of this piece. So there we have the 3 walls that make up the kitchen. This next wall is where the bathroom would have been. Now, as I said in my previous video, I'm not including the bathroom in this build, but I will put the bathroom door there. I realized at this point that I should have cut out 1 layer of the cardboard, just like I did on the front door. However, I didn't do it then, so I've got to do it now. So I'm just going to cut out the space where the door is, but I'm not going down all the way to the bottom. I'm just going to take out that 1 layer. Then I went ahead and built the door just like I did on the first piece. Now the remaining doors in the apartment had some additional trim on it. So I just went in with some coffee stir sticks and just added those additional pieces of trim. I also realized when I looked at the reference picture that the color on the wall was different on this wall. So I had to go back in and repaint it so that it matched the reference picture in the apartment. The next wall, this would be at the very back of the apartment, and there was, I believe it was a storage closet back there. And this is the only door in the apartment that's painted green. All of the other ones are painted purple. Now this wall is the wall that would have had the window in it that they used to crawl out of to get onto the balcony. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out a window on this piece. I couldn't tell from the reference pictures, and I couldn't remember from the show what color this particular wall was. I'm not sure if we ever really saw it. So I opted to just paint it the same beige as the previous 2 walls. So I've just drawn in here with a pencil where that window would have been. And so I'm just going to go in now and cut out that square. Next, of course, was the large window looking out onto the balcony, as well as to Ugly Naked Guy in the apartment across the street. I promise I will get to the windows, but it's not going to happen in this particular video. Again, I also realized in looking at the reference picture that the top portion of this particular wall was also beige, and so I had to go back in and redo some painting there as well. So this was the wall where the bedroom doors were. Now, Monica's room, which would have been on the left, was actually accessed up on the platform that was in front of the big window. And then Rachel's was level with the floor. So it took a little bit to figure out exactly where those doorways were going to be. And also, the wall was not flat. For where each of the doorways were, there was a jut out that came out from the wall. I'm not sure exactly how far it came out. I'm going to make it probably the equivalent of about 8 inches in real time. But like I said, the surface was not flat, and then in that area in the middle, that's of course where the big dresser with the TV and all that kind of fun stuff. Also, again, the top of that wall was beige, so a little bit of painting had to happen there as well. So now that I have the paint even, I'm going to work on those jut outs that came out where the doorways were. So I've cut out 2 layers of cardboard the same size. One will just sit back against the wall, and the other one is going to be where the doorway itself is. And of course, we've already gone over how those doors are made. But I've done one for each side, and once they're completed and the doors are finished, then I'm just going to attach them to the wall. I've used 2-sided tape again to put it all together. It just seems to work better than trying to glue it. So for the outside edge, all I did was just take a thin piece of masking tape and go around the whole outside. It seemed to smooth it off okay, and it actually painted quite well. Once I had the doors finished and installed, it was just a simple matter of going back and painting everything purple. It's going to need a little bit more paint touch up. You can see I've got purple paint on the wall above Monica's door, but I'll go in and fix that. And then that's the end of the walls themselves. So now, once those touch-ups are done, I can go ahead and put the walls in place. So I brought back my base, and now we're going to go ahead and put those walls up. So we'll start with wall number 1, which is the door to the apartment. So I've added some glue to the bottom of the front door, as well as the first layer of that base, because I want a good connection on 2 sides. And then I'm just going to use my 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold it up nice and straight so that the walls are at a 90-degree angle. And I'm just doing these doors one at a time. I'm going to give the glue a chance to catch and to start to set before I move on to any additional walls. So it's here that I realized that I shouldn't have put that extra piece of trim, so I've taken it off now, and I'm just going to add glue wherever those connections are. So remember that this wall now sits at a 90-degree angle with the first wall, and then of course it needs to be glued down to the base as well. So all of the walls are up now, but I wanted to show you some of my trouble spots. So this is what I meant by I cut off that brick and that tile. I should have left that overhang. So I'll have to piece that. I also need to go in and paint the side of that wall as well. And I'm going to have to go in and add some dollhouse band-aids here where you can see all of these openings so that it's nice and smooth, and probably have to do some paint touch-ups as well. Now my biggest issue is that wall that has the big window is just a little bit too long, and you can see where it's pushing the smaller wall beside it, where the window is that they use to get out onto the balcony. So I'm going to have to take that apart and trim that wall down just a little bit so that I can straighten out that other wall. But other than that, so now I've added that brick, of course, to the side. And other than that, all of our walls are up. And I'm pretty happy with how it looks so far. As I said, I have some touch-ups to do for sure. And that's going to bring us to the end of this video. I'm going to take a step away from the friend's apartment now and go back to the dollhouse for a little bit. But when I come back to this project, we'll work on the floor next, and likely the windows as well. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me for this video. I always appreciate that you check in and check out the videos. And until the next one, we will see you soon. Bye for now.